All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. Welcome to the Beekly today. This is a weekly webinar that we do every single Thursday at 2 p.m. My name is Adriel. I'm the founder of Beehive, a climate risk software company. Let's get into it. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to share my screen right over here. We are going to increase the size of that. Beautiful. Perfect. All right. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go over this presentation that I gave at Columbia University about 4 weeks ago. They asked me to come speak. It was a course about how to use AI and sustainability reporting. Let's see, am I able to do this? It's too big. Um, it was about how to use AI and sustainability reporting. And so we are going to be talking about exactly that. What is the history of climate risk reporting specifically? Why does it matter? Again, this is a course I gave about 4 weeks ago to, I don't know, 40, 50 students at Columbia University. So I tried to talk about the subject that they care about, which is climate risk reporting and its history, but I also try to push the thinking a little bit about why does this matter for corporate sustainability professionals? Like who cares about climate risk? Why is this a not a politically charged law, but a useful law for business? And so I took the conversation partially there. So what we're gonna do is I'll walk through this just like I did for the students about a month ago. If you have questions or thoughts, drop them into the chat. I see that open here. There's also a Q&A, so you're welcome to do that as well. And then we will kind of use that opportunity to go through this and answer some questions. So let's get into it. So we're going to talk about the evolution of climate risk disclosures. My name is Adriel. I'm the founder of Beehive. We're an AI-powered ECRM software company. Our customers, many companies who you probably know, use us to comply with laws like SB 261 in California or CSRD in Europe or AASB in Australia, and basically plan for and respond to natural disasters and comply with relevant regulations. They say a lot of nice things about us. So this is them saying nice things. Um, let me let's see. Let me increase this in size here. All right. Okay. So what is the history of climate reporting here and what's relevant and why does this matter? So um what climate reporting began as a voluntary effort. This was in the early 2000s or so. Companies started reporting on climate risk, and they started doing so mostly voluntarily. They thought that maybe it would be strategically an advantage for them to report on things like carbon emissions. I mean, everyone here talks about greenhouse gas emissions and the GHG protocol all the time. The GHG protocol only came out in like 2004. So there was no like formal reporting on emissions to a framework and a standard until relatively recently. And I think that's just important to remember in the context of all the conversations that we have in the corporate sustainability universe about how, oh, this is the way the world went and this is essential. This is only 20 years old. I mean, like some people who are in jobs doing this work are younger than the GHG protocol. So it's a relatively new thing. So throughout the 2000s, this was the voluntary era. Companies thought, hey, maybe if I report on climate related things via sustainability reports, somebody will give me a pat on the back. Customers will like me a little bit more. Maybe an investor will decide to invest in me. And that grew. So in the 2010s, other frameworks came out. So CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project, everybody's best and worst friend, came out in the early 2010s. Frameworks like GRI began to gain traction. And so it was still mostly optional. Like there weren't any laws in the early 2010s requiring this stuff. That changed in the late 2010s, but there weren't any laws requiring this stuff. But investors began saying, hey, I think natural disasters are a problem, or I see people wanting to eat cleaner, or people want to know where their food comes from, or young people care about climate change. It's becoming a topic a little bit. Leonardo DiCaprio is talking about it when he wins an Oscar. So companies began reporting on this, and investors began saying, you know what? Not all investors, just some, that we're going to make it part of our strategy. We think that companies who do this sustainability thing, whatever it is, are going to give me alpha as an investor. They're going to make me more money. So we want to see some of that. That began to grow in the late 2010s. So France and the United Kingdom are some of the first companies to require some sort of climate disclosure. The United Kingdom, which we'll talk more about this, but just home to the TCFD, Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. That was one of the first to require this. So remember those requirements. When we talk about the inevitability of all this stuff, or why companies have to do it, and how can my colleagues not wake up to the fact that they have to do this? It's only been a couple of years that anybody in the world had to do this at all. And I think it's really important to have that historical context. And then in the 2020s, this became much more global. So CSRD in Europe, ASSB in Australia, the California disclosures, which remember are not yet in effect. Everyone talks about how compliance has been a thing forever. California disclosures are in effect like in 2 months. So even in the US, there's not currently, as of this day, that would change in 2 months, a requirement to disclose, or I guess the deadline for that has not yet come up. So just remember in the context of all of your work and all the conversations that we have, this is a new effort. But obviously, if you look at this trajectory, it is moving in the direction of requiring these disclosures to be more formalized, more rigorous, more auditable, because they're moving from voluntary kind of good marketing and good strategic work to just, hey, law says you got to do it. Just like if you go back to the start of accounting, and they think it was the 1500s, a bunch of Italian merchants were like, ooh, if I count my numbers, I'm not going to do it. If I count my numbers here and I think I can track how many ships are coming in and coming out and how much what do people trade? Tulips? How many tulips or in spices are in a chip? I will make more money. Some people disagreed. Some people said it was nonsense, but they said, you know what? I'm going to spend the money on parchments and I'm going to hire people who know how to write. And I'm going to do my accounting for this ship in the year 1506. And I think it'll be a strategic advantage. Well, you fast forward a while, everyone's got to do accounting. It's just a law. 20, 30 years ago, sustainability was this nice advantage. And now it is the law. Don't tell anybody I did an Italian accent. Stays between you and me. So, um, as a part of this, I want to pose the following question. We're going to come back to this at the end of the call. And remember that this was a presentation I did to a university course, so I tried to make it somewhat controversial here, which is what is the point of a regulation? Is the point of regulation to make the world better? Meaning, is the point of a law, if you are studying political science and if you are a company adapting to laws, or if you are a company who is lobbying for or against laws, is the point of a law to make the world better? Or is the point of a law to support free markets? And we think free markets are how you make the world better. Meaning, is the point of government to move the world in a direction of betterness in a way it might not go otherwise? Or is it to allow the world to take shape in whatever format it might want to take, as long as it's driven by the free markets, as long as it's driven by competitive choice, competitive advantage? And this is a really important question because many of us in the sustainability world might say, oh, I'm like, obviously it's to make the world better. Governments can think longer term. Governments have more constituencies than just people who own capital, right? The free markets, if you take care of companies, their only constituent is a stakeholder, is the yes, a stockholder. It's just some owner of the business. But a government has to take care of people and children and the poor and the sick and the wealthy, and everybody has to be taken care of. So maybe the obvious answer is make the world better. The challenge with defending regulation on the premise that it is there to make the world better is that better, the definition of better, changes every 4 to 8 years. What we thought was better between 2020 and 2024 became obviously wrong in 2024 to 2028. What we think is happening in 2024 to 2028, and what the ma- mm, what the majority of America voted in for this period of time to say this is better. Those laws may be seen as obsolete and incorrect and not better 4 years from now if the political winds change. So you got to be careful when you advocate for a law on the basis of better. On the other hand, if we are there to support free markets and we want laws to say, hey, we think that there's nothing more, there's nothing better for society than well regulated free markets. And well regulated means as long as we maintain a certain level of civility, there's fair play, there are laws, there are guidelines, and everyone has an even playing field. Free markets are the way you help the poor and help the sick and help the rich and help the planet, because free markets will always take care of itself. And I think this is an important conversation that I know feels a little bit meta for what we're talking about here, but that we'll come back to because when we talk about climate risk regulation, and when we talk about how to talk about climate risk regulation to our colleagues and to our parents and to our stakeholders and to the lobbyists who work at our companies, are we saying climate risk regulation is there to make the world better? And that's why it's important? Are we saying climate risk regulation there is there to support free markets and to allow companies to be more competitive and investors to have more transparency? And that's why we want them to be there. And I think that's an important conversation subtext to when we talk about climate regulations. So let's come back down to earth and talk about the TCFD. So the TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, came out in 2017 with its initial guidance. Basically, if we go back 2 slides and we say the world's moving towards investors wanting more information, in the 2010s they wanted more context. But they said, I don't. Companies are giving me random stuff. Some have sustainability reports. Some make cool videos. Some do the CDP thing. I need some consistency. So in 2017, back then former mayor, soon to be US presidential candidate, teamed up with back then president of the Bank of England, soon to be Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. So Michael Bloomberg and Mark Carney teamed up and said, hey, we need to have a framework that we ask our companies to disclose about. That we say, hey, this is how we want to see this information. Please fill out this form. And they released this 90-page document explaining how the TCFD works, explaining what they want, what information they want to see from companies, what processes they want companies to go through. And this TCFD has really gained a lot of traction. I think it gained traction. I think it gained traction because it was not there to make the world a better place. It was there to support free markets. And I don't know if this is good or bad. You'll leave that judgment for yourself. But capitalism wins a lot over other categories. And if you can make capitalism win, you support free markets. And so the goal of the TCFD was to better support those free markets. And so they released this disclosure. Hundreds of companies, the biggest companies on earth, were like, yep, we want to do this. Thank you for a transparent guidance of what to do here. The UK became the first large company in 2021 to mandate this reporting, followed by many others. Over that 5 or so year period, thousands of companies began reporting in line with the TCFD. Companies who were previously trying to do some climate risk stuff started putting into the TCFD framework. Companies who did CDP were easily able to translate it into the TCFD framework. Investors who were looking for some way to talk about this now had the TCFD framework about which to talk, or through the lens of which to talk about climate risk. And the TCFD did really well. It was adopted by a lot of countries. In 2023, the TCFD was adopted what's called the IFRS, or sorry, the ISSB. The ISSB is basically for the Americans, and I think everyone here is American. We all use GAAP accounting, generally accepted accounting principles. That's our standard of accounting in the United States. Most of the rest of the world uses ISSB, and ISSB has the accounting standards. And ISSB introduced the IFRS, the International Framework for Sustainability Reporting. And TCFD was a part of that. So basically, actually, we can do this live in a way that I did not do with my Columbia class. We go to the TCFD website. You see a big disclosure that says the TCFD has been disbanded and has been adopted by the IFRS Foundation. And so the TCFD, RIP, technically no more, and it has been adopted by the IFRS Foundation. And so what that means is just that the framework is very similar. IFRS S2 is probably like has 80-90% overlap with TCFD. They just took things a little bit farther. They tried to formalize things a little bit more. It's an accounting body, so they wanted more quantification. So that was adopted in 2023. And then big news, but in 2024, and I guess 25, the EU and CSRD and California's SB 261, so the United States and the EU, two of the largest markets in the world, began to require climate risk reporting in line with TCFD or IFRS or whatever you call it. So SB 261 is the law that we care about here in the United States. Let's talk about it. It's a very simple law in some ways. It was signed into law in October 2023, so happy 2-year birthday recently. And it requires companies with revenues over $500 million to report in line with TCFD recommendations. The first report is due January 1st, 2026. That is in 48 days for those who haven't started. And this is a report you have to publish every other year. Both public and private companies have to do it. It covers about 10,000 companies are subject just to SB 261 because there's 10,000 public and private companies who are based in the United States doing business in California with over 500 million in revenue and has a $50,000 penalty for not compliance. And so this is a big deal. California leads the way. I've been going to a lot of climate conferences lately, and California loves being on stage and talking about how they love leading the way. They are talking about it all of the time. Gavin Newsom just interviewed Bill Clinton on his podcast a couple weeks ago, talked again about California leads the way on these laws. Sydney Burgess is the associate director of the California Air and Resources Board, who is the regulatory body who's regulating these laws. She loves going on stage and saying California leads the way. So, like it or not, that's what they do. And there's other states like New York and Illinois that are considering following. So, what goes into a TCFD report? What do you have to do? Well, the main thing you have to do is this climate risk assessment. And the report is a report of the process and the results of your risk assessment. And there's two parts to the risk assessment. The physical risk assessment asks the question, what is the impact of natural disasters today and in the future? So, where are you exposed to wildfires and floods and hurricanes and heat waves today? And how might that change under different scenarios in the future? I might that change if climate change is really bad and global warming happens and there's a lot of hurricanes out there? How might that change if it doesn't? And we solve those problems and like kind of today is where we're at. So you're able to run those, you have to run those scenarios and understand your exposure to those disasters. A transition risk assessment poses the question, what risks or opportunities exist for your business and an economy impacted by climate change? So this is saying not natural disasters impacting you, but as laws change, as technology moves to cleaner renewable technology, as the market requires more carbon accounting or requires less plastics or cleaner packaging, what changes for you? As investors want more, or there's watchdogs going out and suing people for greenwashing, or young employees want to work for sustainable brands, how does that impact you? And so running this physical risk assessment and transition risk assessment is very important. So again, this is a course for Columbia students, and so many of these students want to get jobs and they want to understand how to run this TCFD assessment. And so traditionally, the approach has been consultants. And you guys know who I am. I run a software company that does this, so obviously, I'm going to call the consulting model expensive and slow. But let's ignore that headline for a moment. Basically, the way a consultant works, good or bad, is they'll quote you, 3 to 4 months or so, depending on how complicated you are and what they're charging. Their prices vary. I mean, you'll find consultants, as always, consultants just how you value your own time. You'll find somebody to do this for you for like $20,000, $30,000 if you just want to like copy paste a competitor's report. You'll find many consultants who want to charge you a lot more than 300. But this range of 70 to 300 is typically what I've seen. So if you're working with the big four, they'll be in the higher half of that. If you're working with more of a boutique, they'll be in the lower half of that. But what they do for you is run these assessments. So they ask you for your assets. They will somehow do research about what physical risks exist. They'll run a bunch of workshops. They'll interview your executives, and they'll oftentimes present you with a deck. A 100+ page slide deck is not an exaggeration. That is often what they do, and it's decks about the models that they use and the findings that they have, and what your competitors have, because the deck is how you present information in the consulting universe. Um, And those are fun. You get compliant, you get a TCFD report. There's a lot of challenges to that. The first is auditability. Those Columbia students and many of you guys in these roles know how important audit trails and auditability is. As you need to get assurance, like in Australia, for example, under AASB, you have to get your risk assessments assured. I just an hour ago got off a call with a bunch of real estate sustainability execs, and one of them was talking about how she voluntarily gets their company's risk assessments assured because it is important that if they're disclosing on something like a risk or financial metrics associated with it, they're able to um, they're able to get that audited and have confidence in that. And you can't audit a slide deck. It's just really difficult to say, where did this information come from? Why did you pick this? Which climate model did you use? It's just really, really difficult to do. Half drafted reports. Basically, some consultants do write your TCFD report for you, some don't. Many times the way they do it is they kind of copy paste what some peers have written, maybe make some adjustments. And sometimes it's totally fine. So I don't mean to fully speak down to it. You don't need to have a beautiful report that's highly unique every time. But one of the challenges is it just takes time to write these reports. It's not rocket science, it's not particularly hard. It just takes time. Anything takes time. So if you've done all the work, it could take another 4 weeks to write a report, just because people are busy. And finally, 4 weeks later, the consultant gives you the report and you read it and you're like, wait a minute, I want to make changes, which is fine. You should always make changes. Of course, you want to make changes. But if it took them 16 weeks to run an assessment and then 4 weeks to write a report, and it's been half a year and your thing is due tomorrow, you just don't have time. You're gonna be frustrated. I think the biggest issue with consultants is that last one, limited strategic value. What are we doing here? I mean, remember, what is the point of the TCFD? What is the point of a law? What is the point of a law? Is the point of a law, where are we? What is the point of a law? To have a law and to like make the world better and force companies to think about these things, or is to support free markets? If the answer, which I think is the answer of the TCFD, is support free markets, then the point of this is not to have another report. The point of this is to or to allow investors to make investment decisions based on what you are doing about your climate risk exposure. And then if you spend all your time assessing your risk exposure, and at the end of a year, you're like, ah, turns out floods are going to kill us all, and you don't do anything about it because you've got no money or time left, that's a problem. Investors are going to sell your stock. They don't need to be a part of that. So I think the biggest issue with the biggest challenge of the consulting approach is that because it takes so much time, because you spend so much money on there, because they give you a deck, you're not getting what you need out of it, which is actual risk management. Uh, so like any great magician, I hide the rabbit and I show it to you. So Beehive does exactly that. And again, the course that I spoke at was I think that course is literally called like AI and corporate sustainability or something. So I taught about the frameworks and I showed the Beehive demo a little bit, which I can do here in a minute. But Beehive does what's called AI powered ECRM, Enterprise Climate Risk Management, which means we help our customers comply with laws like SB 261 literally in 1 hour. It's very fast. It's very cool. We process all your risks. We allow you to audit all this stuff, and we charge flat, fairly simple fees to make that stuff easy. And I can, if you guys are curious, I can show a demo. I'm not planning on it unless somebody asks. Now let's go back to that first question I asked: is the point to support free markets or to make the world a better place? I think the importance of a disclosure is eating your vegetables. And what I mean by that is the following. No one needs to do extra work. Nobody wants to do anything that they don't have to do unless they're really shown that it is valuable. And some individuals don't want to eat their vegetables. My daughter is 2 years old, loves chicken nuggets. They must be in the shape of dinosaurs. I bought her the little spinach nuggets. I thought I'd trick her. Didn't work. Girl does not like vegetables. Somehow, some way, I need to get her to eat some vegetables. So, a company does not want to do climate risk assessments. It is another thing that they have to do. Some saw value in it, between 2017 when the TCFD report came out and 2021 when it was first regulated. Like probably 1,000 companies did do a TCFD disclosure. They saw value in it. They really spent a lot of time on it, but most did not. And the point of this disclosure, the point of this law is to force companies to eat their vegetables, is to force them to do this work. Because if they do this work, they will be better companies. The free market will be a stronger market. If you eat your vegetables, you will be bigger, faster, stronger. If you do this climate risk work, you will be a better company. You will make more money for your shareholders and your stockholders. Like your board will be happy. Their stock price will go up. Now, the goal of this is not to force you to admit anything about climate change that you don't want to admit. The goal of this is not to force you to say climate is the world's biggest problem. Maybe you think that, maybe not. The goal of this is to say, are natural disasters in a changing economy a problem for you? And if they are, and you find out that they are because you ate some vegetables, because you did a disclosure, great, do something about it. And if they're not, great, don't do anything about it. The goal of this is to force companies to ask the question, is climate a material risk to me? And if it is, by nature of what companies are, they will manage that risk. And if it is not, great, then it is not. But at least we have more transparency and a stronger free market. I think this is the last slide. So where does this go? So what would you probably, well, maybe this shouldn't be called the future of climate disclosure, just saying what should a company's roadmap to doing this work should be? Step one, understand these requirements, know what's relevant to you and know what they ask for. Step two, run these assessments, run your physical risk assessment, run your transition risk assessment so you know what you're talking about. I would recommend leveraging technology. There's other companies that do this kind of work. Beehive is one of them. And then the real goal, I should put a bunch of exclamation points around step four, but is integrated into this strategy. A bunch of y'all on the call are in corporate sustainability roles. When you keep this stuff over here and you're the sustainability department doing stuff over here while the rest of the company is over here, that is a problem. That is not a good thing. When you measure emissions, because you have to measure emissions, and sometimes your peers give you some data, but mostly measure emissions, no one thinks about it. That is a problem. If you're just measuring risk over here and nobody ever looks at that risk or does anything about it, that is a problem. That is not good. You want to integrate this into your enterprise climate, into your enterprise risk management work. Your companies all have ERM programs. They all do. They're all of a certain size. Or companies of above $500 million pretty much all have some sort of ERM program. Integrate this in. Begin talking about natural disasters in those conversations. Begin talking to your board about how employee health and safety could be hurt during wildfire season. Begin talking about how a competitor of yours had a plant that got flooded and how you want to do an audit of all your plants. The goal is to bring this into enterprise risk management and not make it a separate thing over here. All right, that is the talk that I gave about a month ago to the wonderful students at Columbia. I'm happy to answer a couple questions, do a demo of Beehive, talk about any of these things. I'll call it a day, 30 minutes in. Whatever you guys like. I'm gonna stop sharing this for a moment here. Any questions? The very first webinar I ever did, we did 30, let me think, I think we did 32 webinars this year. Every Thursday, 2 p.m. I started the last week of January was our first one. And basically I missed like a couple days. I was at a conferences or 4th of July. It's 32, I think, webinars this week, this year. The very first one, I asked if there are any questions, and then I basically immediately shut this off, and I was told that was bad form. So I'm just gonna wait a minute and give people a chance. And while I wait, I want to show you the last webinar we're doing of the year is next week. I'm very excited about it. I'm interviewing my friend Sophia Gluck. Sophia runs sustainability or leads sustainability for Okta, like a 2 billion revenue software company. Many of your companies are probably customers of Okta. So check that out. She's awesome and very smart. And I think you will learn a lot. And that'll be the last one. But if you go to, let me actually drop this link in there as well. If you go to our general calendar, which is right here, you'll see we are beginning to build up the lineup for next year. We've got an interview with the head of sustainability at Universal Music Group, at Braze, the ESG partner at law firm Davis Wright Tremaine, scheduling right now with insurance firm Chubb, and with the good people at Workiva. Hopefully their VP of sustainability will join us. So we got a nice couple of people coming. All right, folks, I think that's about it. If there's no questions, I appreciate the time. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Hope to see you next week. Bye.